start, if I could advise you, if anyone needs the headphones for translation, would you please pick up the headphones outside of this facility? Because there will be the interpretation into French. We'll be speaking English, so if you need the headphones, please pick up the device, so to say. Honorable ministers, honorable commissioner, distinguished panelists, guests, and participants, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor for me to open the panel Support for Sustained Change Post-2015, How Partner Countries Can Capitalize on European Experiences in Transition Management, initiated by the Lithuanian EU Presidency. I am delighted to welcome our high-level panel guests, Ms. Julia Duncan-Cassel, Liberian Minister for Gender and Development from Liberia, Mr. Sufyan Ahmed, Ethiopian Minister for Finance and Economic Development, Mr. Andris Piebalgs, EU Commissioner for Development, Mr. Neris Germanas, Lithuanian Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, and Mr. Jerzy Pomianowski, Executive Director, European Endowment for Democracy, Poland. Let me first of all present the topic of this panel. In the light of the general theme of this year's conference, A Decent Life for All by 2030, when we are trying to find the way forward after the end of MDG's era, this panel is dedicated to the vital role of structural transformation and wide-range good governance reforms. We understand that in order to achieve a decent life for all, many of our partner countries will have to go through a process of reforming underlying structural difficulties and obstacles to stimulate the economic, social, and environmental dimensions of development and to fulfill the promise of a better life worldwide. Furthermore, there is a widespread acknowledgement that after 2015, the international community cannot continue with a strictly aid-based approach. There exists the need to mobilize all our public and private material and non-material resources to achieve substantial results in the upcoming decade. EU member states possess priceless experience and knowledge of the processes related to sustainable institutional, economic, and social reforms. Actually, my country, Lithuania, is one of the success stories of entering the club of the most developed countries in the world in only a little bit more than 1 decade. The transition period in Lithuania after the fall of the Soviet Union, although not without drawbacks and disappointments, has finally resulted in a free and prosperous society. Now, when many countries are in transition to the fully fledged democracy, free market economy, and welfare state model, the experience and knowledge of the EU countries who successfully manage these transitions can be of great help and source of inspiration and new ideas for our partners. I invite all of you to find the background brief prepared by the European Center for Development Policy Management on behalf of the Lithuanian EU Presidency on the website of this panel for more in-depth knowledge of the context of our topic today. Finally, it is important to mention that experience sharing could be a great added value of EU development cooperation, and I do hope that the post-2015 agenda will include this crucial aspect. In this panel, we will discuss this great potential and also the conditions for the experience sharing to be an effective and valuable tool for our partner countries. We're especially keen to hear the thoughts of our partners from Liberia and Ethiopia and how you see this opportunity. I will kindly ask the speakers to not exceed 10 minutes in their presentations so that we have time for a fruitful discussion with our audience. Well, 15 is the very maximum, but 10 minutes would be really appreciated. The first input will be delivered by the EU Commissioner for Development, Andris Piebalgs, who will give an overview of the existing EU policies in the field of transition experience sharing and the future outlook in this field. And of course, my brief question would be, Mr. Commissioner, how do you judge the potential of the EU experience sharing and its effectiveness? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And after such a brilliant introduction, I will be rather brief. Myself and Neris have lived, I think, through all the transformation in our countries after the regaining of independence. And definitely there have been ups and downs. But what I always would recall is that at the end of the day, on the critical issues, you need to take political courage and take decision. There's one example that I always mention from the point of view of political difficulties. My country regained independence after, well, nearly 50 years. And we needed to restore property rights that actually existed by 1939. That means that in 50 years, a lot of people have died, a lot of, well, documents have been lost, and a lot of properties have been used by other people. So you needed to come to establish justice. But the question is, what justice? And justice basically means that you restore rule of law. So you come back to this rather popular decision going backwards. You establish that scheme and legislation. You establish appeal procedure, and you go through the process. It's extremely bruising process. Because if you see the whole society, unfortunately, there are people that lose out of this process. But I believe that the results that have been achieved in stability, in economic growth, and investments definitely means that it was worth doing this reform. And this reform or this approach has been unique. No other parts of the world went through it. Yes, perhaps it's extreme, but definitely we needed to charter a territory where people demands would be there, and you need to respond to people grievances. And I believe that if I would take all the EU new member countries, that's demonstrated that you need to come from the reforms in very short time in rather, I think, politically unprepared territory. So the risks are huge in it. That, I think, is an experience that could be definitely used as example of the political thinking. But there is also a couple of details that definitely would be useful. How you take people to appeal. How you make transitional measures. Then there is another part, and I believe that if I see our partners, they would agree that it's important to, well, to bring tax regime, to have higher taxes, because in most of the countries, very small part of GDP is redistributed. And it's always, you say, it's impossible. I still remember in my country that we needed to discuss machines that you formulate what was being sold, how much does it cost, how much tax is being paid. And it was extremely unpopular because all the small commerciants have been small ones. So they said, we will ruin them. It's impossible to do this. And it will be collapse of the country. Well, it was some difficulties, but it was being done. And then EU acquis implementation. Because basically, there is a good examples of strong legislation, very human rights-oriented legislation, pro-market oriented, pro-investment. But you need adopt and implement it in a rather short time span. And again, I would say the countries that joined the European Union after 2004 went through this unique experience. That's why I believe, as more I have traveled around, that this experience is adequate to the problems in other parts of the world. It's not one-to-one, but the challenge usually is the same magnitude. The difference is that the countries that are going this way, they are not under time pressure. Or there is time pressure, but it's ticking a bit differently, clock. It's not so fast ticking. It is going a bit slower. And that is a blessing, and at the same time also a curse. Because without special pressure on tough reform, why isn't to make it? Because the elections are around the corner. So, and this, I believe, is you need also to get political arguments behind it. And again, the experience of Eastern Europe definitely is something that could be learned. I am very much now following what's happening in Ukraine, because the government decided to shelve the the association agreement for a while. But what I am surprised that hundreds of thousands of these people are going on the streets asking to sign the agreement. That is not groundbreaking agreement, but just because they have had experience of their neighbor countries, and they believe that the reforms that are needed through the association with the EU helps them. So overall, I would say we have a knowledge, we have political experience that is useful. Now it's important really transport this knowledge to our partners. What we have done until now. One thing that we definitely have done is transition compendium. It exists. Then we have also now an interactive public platform for development practitioners called Capacity for Dev. It already contains a good deal of transition material, and we hope that if all actors use it, it can grow and evolve. The Capacity for Dev corner here at Ture Taxis will be happy to tell you more. Then we are creating technical assistance facilities, where I believe if our partner countries definitely are interested, you could request advice actually coming from the newer part of Europe, because transformation experience definitely is by far more adequate compared from the experts coming from older member countries, because challenge was not never exactly the same, I would say, in Germany. Well, Germany has an interesting experience with East Germany, but I would say France and Poland. It's not the same type of challenges that have been faced because of depth and political complexity and political risks related. So I believe that we could beef up these capacities and really to help to get this experience even more. But to get this, we need to be in contact. And I am very grateful, Minister from VTP, because in your country, soon I arrived, your people expressed their condolences about what happened in Riga. And it's not surprising that my Lithuanian colleagues or Estonian colleagues says these condolences. But it is definitely very touching when it to do people in Ethiopia, because for them Latvia is so far away, and still it is so close. And I think the events like this definitely makes us closer and better understanding really is that, we are on the same planet, we share the same destiny. Yes, we have the different starting points. Yes, we have different experiences, but we can learn from each other's experiences to make our people more, make them more welfare, more rights, more prospects in life, actually more prosperity in this broader sense of the world. So I expect this debate, and I think it's a first of this kind. I never have remembered the composition of the representatives, I would say, of the countries we're going to experience and the countries that are our partner countries, but a bit, I would say, in different format, focal sectors, EDF, classical it is. It's a quite interesting and challenging debate. I know that it will not make miracles, but I believe it is a process that we need to involve, and I have seen quite substantial changes in Eastern Europe. My country has increased development aid now, from low point. I participated in an event in Poland about actually relationship with Africa. It was in Katowice, where actually was inspired by business community. Lithuania has now passed a new law and has ambitious programs not only in Afghanistan but also in Moldova. And I could go on and on. Slovakia recently celebrated 10 years. So these all countries are part of our development cooperation, but they have something that you can't buy by money. It is a political and economic transformation experiences, and they are valid. They can't be transported one-to-one, but a lot of elements is there, and it's also sometimes political argument. When the reform is needed, is always question is, has anybody tried to do this? Yes, they have. What they've experienced, this and this. Okay, then we can try it really to convince our, members of parliament or other decision makers that it is the right step to make because it was tried. And a lot of things in this world have been tried. The only problem is that sometimes we forget about the experiences, positive and unfortunately also sometimes negative. We also should learn what should not be done, or at least where the risks are. So I appreciated being in the part of the panel, and I'm very much thrilled to listen for the presentations that will follow. Thank you.
Commissioner, I cannot thank you enough for setting a wonderful tone for the debate and also for sharing your illuminating and eye-opening experiences and remarks. And now I would like to invite Mr. Neris Germanas, Lithuanian Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, to present Lithuanian experience with transition and its value for the post-2015 agenda. Mr. Germanas, how can such countries like Lithuania and other newer EU member states contribute to the goal of a decent life for all by 2030? That would be the question.
Jump immediately to so far. But maybe before I started, thank you, first of all, of course. And I would like to sign everything what Andrei said about our experiences, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia. We really are neighbors and we go the same path, the same way. Only one moment I would like to stress that really in transition period, very important to have in mind that first of all it's necessary political agreement between most important political parties. And secondly, of course, it's very important, it's psychological factor. People wait, of course, the result, but they cannot wait along. That means that we must show the result, maybe very small, but very concrete. In this case, people really trust us. And I would like to try to answer to your question, Professor. I think that, of course, Lithuania, again, Latvia, we have not big material resources. Of course, we have not financial big resources. But what we have, really, we have very active, very skillful, very modern people, and with some kind of the experiences in territory or in region where we lived and maybe a little bit so far. Really, we have not proposed our, assessment of big knowledges about the far regions, far countries. We have not resources for that. But what we know more or less, maybe for that moment, and I will be very frankly, maybe after 20 years, our knowledges would be not so important. But at this moment, really, our people knows the languages, our people knows the tradition of this region, and we can do a lot in some countries, what was mentioned, like Moldova, like Georgia, like other countries. In this case, our value of which we have now, and I think that is very important. In 2030, of course, it's more than 15 years ahead, but I think that really our experience, what we gain, and countries, what we gain in this period would be valuable and for that time. But again, I said, we are not talking from our side, we're not talking about the financial resources. That, of course, we add some money for what possible. But our values, our resources is people, mind of people, experience, and especially I would like to stress young generation. What is very important to have very active, very skillful young generation. And it's necessary to take more, maybe look at the young generation. That is our basis.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. And I think that at this point we have, it works now. Thank you very much. I think we have some possibility to have a question, for instance, if we have some interactive platform question or the question from the audience. So then I think that the minister could accept it. Do we have it? Yes, not quite yet, as I can see. If so, that's fine. There will be lots of questions later on. I'm quite confident on that. So, and I would like to turn to our guests from Africa, and the first minister who comes from an African country, Mr. Sufyan Ahmed, Ethiopian Minister for Finance and Economic Development. Honorable Minister, my question would be, what is the way that you would share your reform experiences and challenges in your country, and how could you use the EU experience in your field?
Thank you very much for inviting me here to share my experience as a finance minister of Ethiopia. More or less exactly at the same time, 20 years ago, we embarked on fundamental economic, political, and social changes, like Lithuania and Estonia and the others. Just at the end of probably one of the longest civil war in Africa. Since then, we have been implementing successive medium-term development programs. And also, we are implementing various reforms focusing on critical sectors like civil service, like justice system, capacity building, decentralization, and empowerment. For this, political commitments, determination, and the vision are very, very crucial. Over the last 10 years, particularly the last 10 years, we saw the fastest growing country in one of the fastest growing economy in Africa, and for that matter in the world is Ethiopia, without major natural resource discoveries. The annual average growth rate of Ethiopian economy for the last 10 years has been 10.9% per annum. And it is also a broad-based one. It's not limited to few sectors. It's not benefiting only a few part of the society. It is a broad-based and it is inclusive. As a result, poverty has been declined significantly in Ethiopia now. Only 15 years ago, only 30% of the children had the opportunity to go to school. Now, we can say we have a universal access to elementary schools. We massively invest in human development, in education, health, in infrastructure. The aim is basically to reduce and eliminate poverty in the medium term, and by 2025, really to see a country that reach a low-level mid-income countries. This is not a theory. I see by myself, on the last 10 years, the economy has been increased significantly. The European Union, being one of our major important development partners, has been extremely helpful, not only in terms of financial assistance. Of course, EU is our largest ODA contributors, but also in sharing the experience of other countries. As we are approaching 2015, the dates for the MDG, we have already achieved 6 of the 8 targets. We are on track. I hope with the assistance of the development partners like the EU, we can achieve the remaining 2, particularly the ones that we found it very difficult is the maternal mortality. We are at the last mile. If we get additional assistance, I hope we can achieve that. We have trained over 37 health extension workers, girls, that go to house, that will teach mothers. And we are trying to provide a small clinic in every village. I hope we can achieve that. During this critical time, I think EU and other development partners can help developing countries during this critical transition period in 4 ways. First of all, really to continue the financial support, not only in terms of quantity, but also in the quality. What I mean by the quality is really to make it more easy to use the resources, to use the country financial systems, to reduce minimize the conditionalities, and also to harmonize by improving the quality and the quantity of the financial support. Second, and most importantly, sharing experiences. I just heard from the ministers, we can really learn quite a lot from each other through training program. It could be through experience sharing visits. It could be through twinning arrangements between institutions and the others. It could be through seminars like this. It could be also through technical supports. And then, most importantly, even we share experiences. Each country has its own conditionalities. Again, as an experience from my position as a finance minister, we also need policy space to explain our own, not really to put us in straitjackets. Over years, partners are willing really to give this policy space. I am very much encouraged. I hope they will continue to that. Finally, market access. This is trade is becoming important as we grow. We need to produce and we need to compete and we need to sell. Really, on long term, we need to be a viable partners with EU. So access to market and finally investments, encouraging European investors really to come to invest in Ethiopia and in Africa will extremely be helpful. These are my thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Very briefly, I would like to ask a very, very short question to Commissioner, if you kindly allow me to do so, very brief, and then I will give the floor to Minister Germanos. Very briefly, Commissioner, you mentioned the singularity of this world, the world as a single place, the world where we have the same destiny, where we share so many challenges and burdens and problems. And yet, when it comes to experience sharing, there is something unique about our experience in terms of very short time span that we had to use to make those reforms possible. And my question would be, is it possible to capitalize on Latvian, Lithuanian, Polish experiences, trying to adapt them to, say, Ethiopian, Liberian experiences? Is there anything like common denominator here?
Well, to be honest, usually the relations is demand-supply basis. Yes, there is supply. That's clear. The question is there demand? And Ethiopian minister mentioned that there is an interest. And I believe the way really to create demand is really to engage also bilaterally with our partners. Because I could say that it's a brilliant idea. They say, okay, fine, it's your idea and that's state is. So only with engaging we start to more trust it. And I believe that's the only way how you create this demand, because you can't just come and to say to the independent country, you should do like this. It should be based on country's own governance plan, and in Ethiopia it's growth and transformation plan. And really that we need to study partners and propose this. So I believe that it's a bit from both sides. So I expect with more political contacts we will get more demand. But we also need really to propose our supply when we discuss development cooperation. What we are ability to do. And there I definitely expect that our delegations discussing programs will use this saying, there is experience that we have when. Are you interested? Because the worst thing is impose, but propose its right approach and then to see how it works together. I also expect, but that's, I think, requires some particular relationship with the countries, that there will be some coalition of willing. I will mention one example where I was impressed in Liberia. It's about gender equality and violence against. All countries have this. let's make a coalition between 2 countries or 3 countries that says, we will manage together to get rid of violence against gender-based violence in our countries, and we will work together on it. But that requires a very particular political relationship, and I expect that that will come. So it is a process. It is a process, and as I told, this event is one of the steps of the process. But what I call on my country, don't consider that world ends only in your neighbor countries. World is also even in Oceania. World is not speaking about Africa. So put your ambition higher. Put your vision further away. And I believe that it's crucial that we follow this process. And the same also our African friends. Don't look only on Spain and Italy and France. There are countries on the other side, and I think it's a process. I know minister would say, well, wait a minute, Ethiopians have been in Latvia, but it's one-off. I think it is a bit more the process that need to be evolving and developing, because continents come closer when the countries come closer. That's how it is, and I very much believe that the political dimension is still not sufficiently developed to use this transitional experience, because that's where I believe the bottleneck is.
Thank you so much. Minister Germanas, please.
I would like to a little bit maybe continues what Andres said or Minister said, really, and just only in our case, in case of Lithuania, we gained some experience working with some countries. We gain these very practical experiences. We collect a lot of the databases. I think that the same is collected from the different countries too. And we discussed with Andres, maybe it would be a very good idea to organize or establish some kind of the action plan, or even starting from the database, common databases, which collect all necessary dates, what is achieved in some countries, how it's achieved, and we can use this because really we lived on information technology ages. What we can do, not directly have contact with the people, but through the information technology, through the information, let's say, channels, we can get started work a lot of good things. And I think this is, if somebody will take, and I think that European Commissioner could take this initiative to starting to establish some kind of the database in where they collect all dates, I think it's helped very much to all countries, and it would be very necessary, I guess. Thank you.
Minister, do you have any remark in exchange? No?
No.
Yep. At this point, no, not this time. Thank you very much. And now I'm delighted to give the floor to our next speaker, Ms. Julia Duncan-Cassell, Liberian Minister for Gender and Development, who will concentrate on Liberia's perspective in this debate. And Honorable Minister, how could transition experience be of use for your country?
Thank you. And I want to say thanks to the organizer for inviting a small country like Liberia to such a forum and sitting by this huge country, Ethiopia, at this table with all these male to one female. But I think that is the gender equity and gender balance we're looking for. But as you may know, Liberia is just celebrating 10 years of peace with a new democracy after 2005, democratically electing a new president, and 2011, the second election that went on peacefully. The sustainability of these, the peace that we enjoy today and the democracy we enjoy depends on our partnership with such countries like countries in the EU and our own regional and sub-regional organizations. Liberia is going through a transformation. So we have set what we call an agenda for transformation. Part of that transformation is ensuring that land rights, that people have access to land, everyone, because we feel that it's a human rights violation. We're going through what we call our constitution review, the constitution review process. In 1986, we had some work done on the constitution, but looking at it now, we think there's a need for it to be reviewed because there's a lot of issues in there that has to do with violation of human rights. Elections reform, which we think are all part of the sustainability of the democracy and peace that we have. So these are all things that we are going through in Liberia now, access to justice. Regional coordinations. We do believe that if we are to sustain the peace and the democracy we have in Liberia, there has to be peace within the region. If there's peace in Sierra Leone, there'll be peace in Liberia. If there's peace in Cote d'Ivoire, there'll be peace in Liberia. If there's peace in Guinea or Ghana, our neighboring country. So we look for the strengthening of our regional organizations like the Mana River Union, ECOWAS, then of course the big one, which is the AU, but regional coordination between the various countries, because we share a lot together. And with that being said, there's a lot that working with countries in the EU can do to help us in our transformation and sustaining the peace that we enjoy today. Women as agents of change. We know that the role that the women in Liberia play in bringing the peace that we have today. And because of that, they elected a female president 2 times in a row. But now our constitution does not allow for her to run for the 3rd time. So what happened after that? How do we prepare more women to take up the role of political leadership? We have a by-election coming up, a midterm election next year for 15 seats, 15 senator seats. 3 of those senators are up for re-elections. How many females are going to be elected? How are we getting ready to prepare them for elections? 2017 is going to be a big challenge of the democracy that we enjoy today and the peace, because it's going to be general elections for presidents, for municipalities, for local governments, and all. So the governance of our country depends on our own contributions and working with our partners like the EU, the UN, the US, and other good countries in and around the world. So just to say that, but with women being agents of change, they need to be in the forefront of all of these. They need to have the political will. They need to be at the political table. They need to be at all decision-making area in ensuring that we sustain the peace and we continue with the democracy that we have gained for the last 7 years. I'll stop there, and maybe there's a question to ask.
I would ask you, Minister, what do you think is the biggest challenge for the successful transition experience sharing in your country? What kind of challenges you would see?
Education, infrastructure, hydro because of the electricity, to be able to, when we say infrastructure, talking about the road network. In some countries, they have civil crisis and all of their infrastructures are left in place. Unfortunately, in Liberia, that was not the case for us. Everything was destroyed. Everything in the country, down to the hydro, the roads were cut off, people were cut off from one county to the other. But since 2006 to now, a lot has been done, but not enough. So helping us rebuild our infrastructure, helping us connect the roads to different counties so that people can have free movement, building our judiciary system, and looking at our election reform laws, so to ensure that full participation of all of our citizens, be it male or female, giving the rights to women, and Ambassador, the Commissioner of the EU spoke about violence. During our civil crisis, a lot of our women were abused and misused, and it's still continuing now. Like someone said, the guns are down, but the women are still facing war in terms of violence. Domestic violence, rape, and sexual violence is still going on. So that's a form of war that is going on against women. Ensuring that those can be addressed and eradicated are some of the challenges that we will face in order to sustain this democracy that we've gained.
Thank you. Thank you. If at this point other panelists wouldn't wish to ask any questions or to react thus far, if this is not the case, so then I would go straight to Mr. Jerzy Pomianowski, Executive Director, European Endowment for Democracy from Poland. And my question would be, Mr. Pomianowski, what projects does your organization run in the field of experience sharing, and how do you evaluate the results of these projects?
Thank you very much. Thank you for being invited here, especially to this very much government-dominated panel, as we are an NGO. So it's my pleasure, although I have spent myself quite many years in the government of Poland, trying to make our transition to our democracy as smooth as possible. But today I'm enjoying the freedom of representing NGO. And as a sign of my freedom, I took off my tie. So you can make an easy distinction who belongs to government and who is a free man. Well, let me share with you a few thoughts about Polish perspective and also a specific role that European Endowment for Democracy will play. Of course, European Endowment for Democracy is a Brussels-based organization, so when we speak European Endowment, Poland, we have to remember that we are talking only about a moment that whole initiative was triggered. And I think this is a good example how the transition experience was brought to the attention of the European audience when Poland initiated the project of setting up European Endowment for Democracy. And many of new EU members join us in this endeavor. And in a short period of time, this endowment was established with agreement of the whole European Union. So that is a good example how transitional experience was bringing a very concrete results to the European policy. But let me as last speaker, refer to a few important points that were here already said. I think what Commissioner Piebalgs said, for me, it's a very interesting and important point, as I could see this from our own perspective as well. One of the most important lessons from our transition in this part of the world is that we had to implement the transition process and all its aspects at once. We had very short time, and we had to deal with every aspect of transition within this very short time span. I think it's similar as in case of Liberia. We had to implement basic regulations, laws, creating a situation where we cannot say that first economic growth and then basic freedoms, that first health and social services, and then maybe rule of law and basic democratic values to be in place. Everything had to be done at once. I think it's an extremely important aspect and experience that we are bringing. The other element I think important to say, especially here, for many years, the development cooperation was very government-centered. And as even seeing here how government-dominated panel this is, it still continues, although, of course, reflection is there. Maybe because one of the main international institutions like OECD is a government, a member-based organization. So this government-centered approach now slowly changing. And I think also that's an enormously important input from the transition in our part of the Europe. What we see today in the Euromaidan in Kiev, it's exactly a picture when we see results of working directly with society, not only with governments. So it is an obligation to work with the societies, not only with governments, because governments, unless we are having a democratic government, they do change, but society stays. If we are signing an agreement with Ukraine, we are signing with the Ukrainian nation, not with the government. So that is the dimension that needs not to be forgotten. So European Endowment for Democracy is an endeavor that is supposed to address some of those new challenges and also bring those experiences, being more flexible, less bureaucratic, more speedy mechanism. We are very new. We are operating just from July on. So we just recently received first 300 applications. We are operating in a limited geographical scope, just in the European neighborhood, in the Eastern Partnership and the Mediterranean region. But still, all our activities are based on this new, less bureaucratic, more flexible approach. And we strongly believe that dealing directly with the civil society, it's a right way to do. Let me conclude with a few more general comments on the nature of of international cooperation. As you all know, 30 years ago, pointing corruption was seen as interfering into internal politics of a partner country. 25 years ago, big Western national and multinational companies were officially reporting the part of their operational budget spending as a way to ensure privileged treatment by the public officials on the developing countries. So it was that time not a crime in their own legal systems. It has changed. Now, anti-corruption agenda is an important part of development agenda. Now, anti-bribery convention is signed by more than 40 countries. So the world is changing, slowly, but changing. I do strongly believe that attaching more and more importance to human rights and democracy agenda in post-2015 development cooperation is the right direction. That needs to be strongly reflected in all EU strategic and programming documents. The principle of the international solidarity needs to be rooted in shared values, respect to basic freedoms, human rights, and democracy. We may ask the question, today we see like a big event on democracy, World Forum of Democracy, Council of Europe, and EU Development Days are organized almost at the same time. So it looks like a democracy community and development assistance communities are existing in two different worlds and where different rules and concepts apply. I don't think so. The world is one and the community is also one. So I think Europe needs more coherence in its policies and Europe needs more policies based on its core values. Only such an approach would enable sustainable change in post-2015 world. We know from even our neighborhood that trading human rights for regional security and stabilization or trading freedom of assembly for economic growth is not an option. It is always a short-term perspective. I'm not saying those choices are always easy to be made. That is why we need, and I'm calling for more coherence in our European approach. And I do strongly believe that this is one of the key messages that new members of the EU want to share, bringing the story of our own successful democratic transition. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And I would like to ask a very brief comment from you, Mr. Pomenovsky, and from Lithuanian Minister of Foreign Affairs. A very brief comment concerning the role of the European Union in promoting transition experience sharing. I'm asking this because Commissioner Piebalgs mentioned that in fact sometimes it matters when a country speaks to the country, or for instance when the continent speaks to the continent. But at the same time, what is the role of the EU? It's quite legitimate of me to ask because Lithuania has its presidency over the EU Council. Poland has very similar, almost uniquely similar, and even larger experience concerning East Central European transition. So the EU dimension, what is specific about the EU dimension in this process? Yeah.
I think the presidency is much more in position.
Okay. No, always we are talking about that European Commission, European Union is, let's say, one of the biggest partner for the countries, and of course a lot of the possibilities for that what is in the hands of the European Union. And I think if the European Union is doing the same, that this transitional support of this sustainable development, support of this what is going in the other countries, even so far from us, it's very important for the European Union. And I guess that really we try to continue that, and we try to push European Commission to take more maybe attention for the developing countries, what we can do in this case, of course. And I hope that it could continue. It's not only Lithuania is presidency for the 6 months, but it must be a permanent process, which is take from other countries and take to who will take our presidency. And I think really the experiences was gained here in the European Union, and which is again with the cooperation with other countries, it's very important. And I can only repeat that really we collect a lot of the possibility, a lot of the experiences for the possibility to change situation, even shows the possible way which is you can go there. And what we mentioned, I want one point I would like to mention, what we talking when we are talking about possibility to transition period, who participate in that or no. We didn't mention one very important aspect. This is private sector. Because really, when starting to work even in our experiences, even our neighbors, we create some condition for the activity, business activity. And private component, private business, it's very important because there is much more. Okay, we are now from the government side. The private sector is much more active, and they always are ahead. They shows the possibility what we can do. And even with some other countries, not only in this region, but they're very active even in the regions which is very far. And I think for transitional experiences, for this developing, it's very important to the business, from the business point of view. And one other question, what I would like to ask maybe for everybody here. We are talking about the positive. What is the we gain experiences, how we can use. But what about the mistakes? There was no mistakes? Or we can say about the mistake, not very big mistakes, but really negative experience is the same experiences for the positive, for the developing. We are not just talking about what is necessary to do, what we did, how to achieve something. But I guess that even from our side, we can say that maybe it was possible to change a little bit. I don't know, it's because you cannot turn history back. But I think for the whole pictures, if we would like to see and some possibility how to maybe avoid these mistakes in other regions. I think that would be very interesting to discuss if we have time, of course, that.
Mr. Komendowski?
Well, I think we, as European Union, we made it possible to work together, a group of countries with a different history, with a different cultures, with a different approaches to each other, but still we could establish a common set of shared values, also procedures, and understanding what is relation between state and the citizen. And this is an experience that is universal. And here I think there is a special moral obligation of Europe to carry on this message. If Europe is just an economic enterprise that provides good wealth and the freedom of movement for people, that wouldn't be enough. So I think this is the message we need to send outside of Europe, together with our hand to help those who are willing to share similar basic values with us. And I think enlargement of Europe, it's an important process. It should never stop. In a sense, we should always be open to other nations. That refers to our migration policy, trade policies. It's not only about democracy, assistance, or development cooperation. So here, I would like to once again call on those coherences, more coherent policies where different aspects of our work, both with the other governments, countries, and societies, is put on equal footing, and that we have more coherence. That is only the right approach that will eventually bring sustainable cooperation and sustainable change in future.
Before I give the floor to the audience, just a very brief question to Ethiopian or Liberian ministers. Do we have anything to add here? If you have some remarks, please go ahead.
The role of the NGOs, private sector, very, very important. But we should not also forget the role of the state, particularly in countries like Ethiopia. What we need is a very transparent, accountable, but a strong state. Without a strong state that is accountable, that is transparent, really we cannot provide basic services. Initially, it's not like in Europe, as you can imagine. So that is the one point that I wanted to stress. The second, democracy and economic development, we cannot separate. I absolutely agree with that. Without human rights, without democracy, we cannot sustain economic development. They should reinforce each other. But as I see, democracy It's not only law, it's not only procedures, it also required institutions. We need a very strong democratic institutions. Also, over time, we need also to create a tolerant society, culture. So this is the issue of really the timing should be understood in such a ways. It varies from country to countries. For countries like Ethiopia, which has been feudal society for centuries and centuries, and then the country that experiments military and central planning for 2 decades, we just emerged from that. It takes time to really create a strong democratic institution. This sometimes it is really misunderstood and it's simplified. So it's not as simple as that. So democracy, yes, absolutely important, but it's more than really the laws in it is really institutions, cultures, and creating tolerant societies.
Thank you. Liberian Minister?
And let me just add, the Vice Minister asked what are the challenges and what went wrong. But I think those concerns have been addressed in other meetings and panels. But for this discussion for support for sustainable change in post-2015. But let me just say, especially to the non-governmental NGO gentleman on my left, most time when NGOs, say for example, if an NGO have been working in Mali and decided to leave from Mali and go to Liberia, they want to do one size fit all. Liberia, during our conflict, we had a lot of NGOs coming to our rescue because it was aid at the time. People needed a lot of assistance. People were depending on foreign assistance and donors and partners. But sometimes I think they should stop and ask, what do you need? How do you get involved so that the locals too can own the process? And then after they've gone, the ownership of whatever donor funding a project that was there is owned by the community, it's owned by the people. But if you just went into a community and start to work without engaging the people themselves, you will find out most of the time when you went back there and they asked them about a project, they will tell you, I don't know, the NGO did that, because they didn't take ownership of it. So those are just some of the few, but I don't think for the discussion here today was to talk about some of the wrongs that has been corrected and some of what has happened working with foreign countries and donors and NGOs. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. So the time comes for questions. So let me start the question and answer session. And I think we still expect a question received from the interactive platform. So if we have one, so then I would try to read it aloud. Yes, if we don't have the interactive question, then I would take from the audience. Yes. Yes, please. Please, the mic.
Thank you. I have a kind of comment maybe about business that Mr. Neri said about encouraging business. So, if national governments and international community encourage business, so this means that this community should ensure that business pays taxes and that this money are not gone from developing world, let's say. So maybe my question goes to representatives of Ethiopia and Liberia. How do you see business coming to your countries? And how we could change this situation when huge amounts of money flow out of your countries?
Yes, ministers.
Well, as I've said, the private sector business, we call it the private sector or investment, are very, very crucial. Ultimately, they are the one really who should ensure the sustainability of economic growth. The business of the government is, first of all, really to provide basic infrastructures, road, energy, training of human powers and so forth. And then to create a conducive environment, say law procedures. In that case, the private sector can contribute in many ways. First of all, with them they bring technology, they bring knowledge. Local can learn from them. They can create their own business in the long term. But we expect also they pay taxes. I'm sure in the future, this is the concept of the sharing the informations is going to be very, very important. That will also create accountability, transparency on both sides to fight corruptions. So when the government creates a conducive environment, the business, they should also pay proper taxes. But without the private sector, we cannot sustain economic growth. And unfortunately, in Ethiopia and other many African countries, we don't see European investors now. We are seeing investors from other continents. While the Europe and Africa has long history, geographically very close. So I think this mentality of seeing Africa as a continent with only to humanitarian and development assistance, our European partners and investors really should consider Africa now seriously as a continent where really to do business and where they can make money.
Thank you. Ms. Julia Duncan-Cassell.
Well, I'm not the finance minister or the investment commission executive director, but Liberia is open for business. And we know as a business person, you will pay taxes to government. So obviously you have to make profit out of your business. But it will also create jobs for our citizens. In creating jobs, you're not going to take all of the money out of the country, so we are not concerned about that, but we are concerned about you paying your taxes, following the laws on the grounds, and helping to maybe form a local partnership, because Liberia is a small country, and Liberians are looking to partner with foreign businesses in order to improve and move our economy forward.
Yes, your question? Okay.
Yes, my name is Gedrus Sabalauskas. I work with UNDP, but for the past 2 years I've worked in Sierra Leone, lived and worked in Sierra Leone, together with the ministries and the Office of the President on the private sector. So my question again is related to the private sector, and I would like to ask honorable ministers from Ethiopia and Liberia to share a little bit of experience on how did your countries engage the private sector in building the key elements of your economy, infrastructure, roads, etc. What kind of lessons did your countries learn in engaging the multinational corporations entering into your countries? Were there any good or bad experiences in this process? The reason I'm asking that is because the transition economies, Eastern Europe, after joining EU or in the process of joining this big club, has received as well enormous amount of interest from various countries, looking for new markets, looking for opportunities to invest. And there have been a lot of lessons learned. That's why people like me travel around and advise other countries. What are the lessons? What are the experiences in your countries? Thank you.
Well, again, let me...
Yes, it's a very complex question. I have to say that it's a question worth a conference, but well, we can try to be brief on that.
Well, the private sector, first of all, they are looking for a stable country, peaceful, because before they invest, they are looking whether there is a peace and a stability. Following that, they will look for a business opportunities. If there is a business opportunities, of course they will come. But from our experience, the three most important things that they are looking for is infrastructure, as the minister said. Without having cheap or affordable transport, we cannot really attract investment. Road, or it could be railways. In the case of Ethiopia, it is both. Then they are looking for energy, electricity. Fortunately, we have huge potential for energy, renewable energy. The tariff in Ethiopia, I have been told, is the lowest in the world because you can generate at a very cheap prices. They are looking for energy. Finally, they are also looking for trainable labor. Without this, we cannot attract investment. And for this, again, it comes back to the role of a state. It is only the state that can really provide all these risks initially. No private sector will come and invest in Liberia to do railways or hydro. It should be the responsibility of the government. The road, the same. Training of labor force, again, it is the role of the state. So from our experience, initially, the role of the state, we should not really undermine it from the experience of Ethiopia and many similar African countries.
Yes, and the Liberian minister.
Thank you to UNDP. Right after the 2005 election, after the inauguration, the government held an investment forum to say Liberia is a country very rich in natural resources. You name it, we have it. What is lacking? A lot of investors went to Liberia, but like I said, they would not work under the condition where there's no infrastructure, no electricity, running water. Those were very important to them. Just recently, about 3 years ago, the railroad from Nimba to Grand Bassa were rehabilitated, and so trains are running up and down now. ArcelorMittal is able to transport iron ore from the Mount Nimba to the port of Buchanan. We have other railroads that were totally damaged. Road connection was a serious problem. Electricity. Companies want to go to places where there are infrastructure and then they just pick up from there. But I haven't seen anyone wanting to go to Liberia and build from ground up, from scratch. Until we can get those people, we are open for business. We have all of the natural resources that you need. All we ask for now is that we add value to our natural resources, that you don't just ship out the raw produce anymore. But we can discuss that. You can go on the investment website. It's active, and all of the rules and regulations on investing in Liberia, it's there. Thank you.
Thank you. Still, we are running out of time. I would like to act in the following way. I would like to collect 3 questions now. So I have a lady here and 2 gentlemen there. So please, to the lady and then there. So 3 questions now.
Thank you. My name is Giedrė Biržytė. I'm representing Lithuania National Platform of Development Cooperation Organizations. I'm very glad to see this panel where our government and colleagues are sitting together with the African colleagues, and I would really like to comment rather than to put a question. Lithuania, as well as another 12 new European Union states, are looking for their niche in a development cooperation, and actually next year we will celebrate 10 years of being donor countries. So I would like to encourage the dialogue, because it's very good idea and which we welcome, to share the transition experience. But I think that even the African countries are so diverse and so different that it would be very important to know what could it be precisely, what would be the need of our experience sharing. And actually, it would be very good that African countries themselves would come to EU new member states and remind them that they actually have a big part, besides being experienced in transition, that they have a big part in the European Union policy making, and just to raise the questions, address them as equal, because that's what we do, a national NGO platform. We try to say that there are instruments on EU level, but also we do encourage the bilateral dialogue. So thank you very much for this panel.
Thank you, and I would like to ask you to bring the mic over there, so we have two gentlemen who raised their hands.
Sorry, I've been given the mic, so I'm going to
Okay,
go.
a lady,
okay.
yes, thank you. I'm very, very sorry, I'm blinded by the lights.
That's okay.
Yep.
My name's Harpinder, I'm from Development Initiatives. I've got experience of working in West Africa, and we also have offices in Uganda and Kenya. I'm going to lump 3 questions in together, if that's okay. Firstly, to also look at how information and learning can happen between African states. Ethiopia has a lot to offer other African states on how to promote inclusive growth. So I'd like to learn a little bit more about how you can be playing that role in Africa as well. And also to look, to ask yourself and the Minister for Liberia on how ODA can be used in the post-2015 agenda to leverage new finance into the countries as well, and what your thoughts are around that agenda. And finally, with regards to building the relationship between state and citizens, your impressions of including access to information as a transformational part of the post-2015 agenda. Citizens are very, very keen to have more information about what government's doing, how it's doing it, where the money is being spent, including money coming in from external sources, and how you will be promoting that agenda in the post-2015 dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you. In the meantime, one final question, please. Yeah, no, behind you. They have it behind you. Yep. Yep, you.
Okay,
yourself. Yeah.
Thank you very much. My name is Patrick Kugiel. I'm from the Polish Institute of International Affairs. To my best understanding, crucial part of this transformation experience of the European Union is regional integration and cooperation. For countries like Poland or Lithuania, first the prospects and then the accession to the EU itself did play a very important role in encouraging reforms, ambitious reforms, and then it assisted in navigating through this difficult period quite successfully. Obviously, Liberia or Ethiopia will not join the European Union, but you have your own regional organizations at different levels of integration and cooperation. But I'm just want to pose this question to our African panelists. If you see any space for sharing experiences on the subject of regional cooperation and integration with the new member states, if you see any potential that some of our experiences in this regard can be of help for Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. One final question, please, yourself, yes. And then we will ask our colleagues to respond. Yeah.
Okay, Ilario Saen from Engineers Without Borders. I wanted to ask to a representative from Liberia and Ethiopia about this topic of economic growth, because of course it is a really important matter to develop the infrastructure, the energy for a country, but we are facing here now in Europe some limitations of this politics about the economic growth that is not sustainable in the long term. And my question is there a reflection going on how could you learn from our mistakes in the long term to avoid to get to this situation and to have a more sustainable policy in the long term? Thank you.
Thank you. I will ask the Ethiopian and the Liberian ministers to respond. We had a set of questions, but I think they all revolve around your countries. And gentlemen and lady, would you please? Yes.
First of all, really to sustain development, what we should not repeat is not to destroy the environment. Africa is now paying, particularly Ethiopia is now paying the price for what we have not done. So we take the issue of the climate change seriously. And all our development plan strategies are really anchored on that, to be environmentally friendly. if we destroy, we cannot sustain it. So the number one that we should avoid is not to do what you have done over centuries. That is the number one. Second is regional integration is critical. In Africa, we have various regional economic blocks in the west, in the south, in the center, in the east, and also in the north. And we are playing a very important role, really, to trade among ourselves, to connect with each other. For this, again, the availability of infrastructure is extremely important. Road, energy connections, extremely important, and of course to do away with this bureaucratic border check, visas, and other requirements. So regional integration is extremely important. Finally, I think the bilateral relationship with the newly member states of the European Union, that you mentioned, I think is critically important. We can learn a lot from each other. So we need to continue this dialogue also at the bilateral level. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we're open to building a new relationship with the new countries and looking at best practices. Because we are in a technology world now, so you know, people all around the world pay attention to the news, they're on the different blogs and social network. Liberia is no exception. We have a very, very young society. So the generation gap is very important in showing that they are at the table and they participate in all of the development processes so that we have a long-term and sustainable growth in our economy. She asked about leveraging more funds. That would be part of what's come out of the new MDGs. You know, our president was part of the panel, one of the co-chairs, and she also co-chairing the African panel 2 and ECOWAS. So she plays a very important role because of the country we come from, and she knows that the next generation unborn have to be able to sustain what she's putting in place and the gains that we have made. So our youth are very involved in the process. In fact, we have a lot of young people in government right now in Liberia, so that gap can be closed. Like past governments were all done by, I don't want to say what group, but this time around, people are learning from other countries. They see what's happening around the world. They see how countries are collapsing. We want to learn from all of those mistakes and to be able to build on that to sustain the growth that we are gaining. Thank you.
Yes, and I guess the time comes for me to sum it up. That's the time for the summary, and I have to say that, first and foremost, I'm deeply grateful to all panelists for their wonderful remarks and for the questions and comments that the audience made as well. Very briefly, I would say that, in fact, the development is something that breaks our illusions, cliches, and stereotypes like a house of cards. We're tempted to think that dire straits may exist only in Africa or Central Asia, which is a big mistake. We know that, in fact, the wealth, prosperity grows in Africa as well, and dire straits may exist in the middle of Europe. We know such examples as Albania, Moldova. We know very disturbed, very problematic countries in our continent. And that's why there is something that links our countries, case by case, region by region, continent by continent. And I couldn't agree more with our speakers, from our commissioner to our ministers from Africa, that in fact there is something deeply universal about it. But at the same time, the development is not linked to businesses or the state programs alone. In fact, it is linked to human rights. What is very important, we cannot hope for the increase of awareness or the rise of human sensitivities, women's rights, children's rights, human rights, civil liberties, fundamental rights without development. How can we expect a miracle happen in isolated societies when people badly want to reach out and to reach the world beyond? How can we expect of abused child to be willing and dreaming of how to reciprocate love to the world when there was none. Meaning that development is about our sensibilities without which the world is impossible to imagine. And that's why, of course, never ask for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for you, of course. That's John Donne, which perfectly applies to this situation. But not only the bell which tolls. I think that there are some joys. There are some joys of solidarity and our connection. And this is, ladies and gentlemen, exactly what I would like to celebrate tonight, and for which I would like to thank our panelists. A sense of shared destiny, a sense of shared responsibility for this world. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed.